She used my miles to fly first class, then posted, just the immediate family. I stood in my kitchen, staring at Melanie's smug photo from Tuscany, mom and dad beaming, cousins clinking glasses, and me erased like I'd never existed. 4 days of secret memories planned behind my back. But that wasn't the worst part. A courier arrived that same day with a notarized letter. My parents had officially transferred the family vacation fund, my fund, to Melanie. No discussion, no warning, just gone. They thought I'd stay quiet. What my sister didn't know. I kept every receipt, every signature, every single date. And what I found buried in those records was going to end her. My name is Laura Carter, and I'm 45 years old. Each morning, I sort spreadsheets in my minimalist apartment, where fresh coffee mingles with the crisp scent of ledger paper. My younger sister, Melanie, has always been the family darling, her designer lifestyle and sharp comments piercing our holiday gatherings like tiny wounds. I've stayed in my lane, managing our shared vacation fund and frequent flyer miles with the precision my accounting career demands. Every transaction, every mile transfer, every group decision, I've documented it all, each record dated and filed with professional care. Lately, Melanie's been handling more family plans, her returned calls growing scarce. My stomach tightens when I see her number flash on my phone. But there's one thing my sister has never understood about me. Accountants keep receipts. But let me start from the beginning. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was at my kitchen counter sipping my usual dark roast while scrolling through Facebook. You know how it goes. Mindless thumb-flicking past birthday wishes and cat videos. Then I saw it. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. The post was from Melanie, my sister. There they all were, Mom and Dad beaming under string lights at some quaint trattoria, our cousins Mark and Jenny raising wine glasses, and Melanie front and center, her designer sunglasses perched just so for the perfect candid shot. 5 photos in total, each one a knife twist because I wasn't in any of them. My hands started shaking so bad I had to set my phone down. The espresso machine hissed in the background, a sound that usually calmed me, but now felt like it was mocking my morning routine. How many family trips had I helped plan over the years? How many spreadsheets had I created, tracking our shared frequent flyer miles, finding the best deals on hotels? I picked up my phone again, forcing myself to look closer. The timestamps told their own story. They'd been there for 4 days already. 4 days of family meals, inside jokes, and memories I'd never be part of. Each caption was carefully worded, "The whole gang's here," and "Nothing better than quality time with your closest family." The tags included everyone but me. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate erasure. You ever have one of those moments where the world just stops making sense? Where everything you thought you knew about your place in it just shifts? I started typing out a text to Melanie. "Hey, looks like you're having a great time in Italy." I must have missed the planning discussions, but I deleted it character by character. Too passive, too willing to play along with the fiction that this was somehow an accident. Instead, I hit the call button, straight to voicemail. I waited 15 minutes and tried again. Same result. Third time, 30 minutes later, still nothing but her chirpy greeting telling me to leave a message. I saved screenshots of everything, the post, the timestamps, the carefully crafted captions. Old habits die hard, and accountants document everything. But this wasn't about building a paper trail. This was about understanding exactly what I was dealing with. The clock on my microwave showed 6:45 p.m. when I finally made my decision. Mom and Dad were always home Tuesday evenings. Their bridge club night was Thursdays. I grabbed my car keys, barely registering the familiar weight of my sensible keychain with its mini flashlight and loyalty card fobs. The drive to their house was muscle memory. 22 minutes of trying to keep my breathing steady while my mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. Maybe they'd tried to reach me and failed. Maybe, but I knew better. When you've spent your career Analyzing numbers, you learn to recognize patterns. This one was crystal clear. I parked in their driveway at 7:08 p.m., my headlights sweeping across the familiar facade of their colonial-style home. The garden beds I'd helped Mom plant last spring were full of early summer blooms. As I walked up the brick path to their front door, my shoes clicking against each step, I rehearsed what I'd say. Keep it professional. Stick to the facts. Ask for clear explanations. I raised my hand to knock, and that's when the porch light clicked on. Someone was home, and they knew I was here. Now there was no turning back. It was time for answers. Mom's hands trembled slightly as she poured tea into my favorite blue ceramic mug, the one I'd brought back from that outlet shopping trip we took together last spring. I watched the steam curl up, remembering how we'd laughed over lunch that day, sharing secrets and plans. Now the kitchen felt different, like I was interviewing hostile witnesses instead of sitting with my parents. Dad shuffled papers at the other end of the table, methodically squaring the edges of what looked like utility bills. The tick-tick-tick of his organizing was the only sound for a long moment. "So," I said, keeping my voice level, professional, "Italy looks beautiful. The photos Melanie posted are stunning." I paused, waiting for either of them to meet my eyes. Neither did. "Oh yes," Mom said, her tone artificially bright. "The weather's been just perfect for them." "Interesting timing," I continued. "Usually we plan these big family trips together. When did the discussion start?" Dad cleared his throat. "Melanie handled all the planning." There it was, that phrase. I'd heard it too many times lately, always delivered with the same careful inflection. Right, but surely there were conversations about dates, guest lists. I mean, coordinating everyone's schedules must have taken some work. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check something. Did Melanie send out group emails or— "Dear," Mom cut in, her voice taking on that soft, patronizing tone she used when explaining things to small children. "Melanie handled the planning. She arranged everything." I pressed the call button on my phone, Melanie's number already dialed. It rang once before hitting voicemail. Again. The vibration seemed to echo against the wooden table. Dad started gathering his papers. "You know how good she is at organizing these things." My tea sat untouched, growing cold, the same way I felt inside, chilled, stagnant. I tried one more time. But who decided who would go? Was there a budget discussion or— "Melanie handled the planning," they said in near unison, like it was rehearsed. Because it was rehearsed, I realized, this wasn't a conversation, it was a performance. You know that feeling when you're suddenly aware you're the only one who didn't get the script? When everyone else is reading from the same page and you're just there? I see. I stood up, smoothing my slacks with steady hands. Years of client meetings had taught me how to maintain composure when numbers didn't add up. "Well, I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow." Mom walked me to the door, murmuring something about getting together for lunch soon. The thud of the door closing behind me felt like a rubber stamp. Request denied. Back home, I booted up my laptop and opened the travel point spreadsheet I'd maintained for years. There it was, a transfer to Melanie's account 3 months ago. For Christmas shopping, she'd said. I'd even color-coded the cell green to mark it as approved. I tried calling her again, straight to voicemail. The phone landed face down next to my keyboard, a surrender flag in silver and glass. Sleep, I decided. Sleep before I said something I couldn't take back. But my dreams were restless, full of family photos where my face kept blurring out. At 3:17 a.m., my phone pinged. For a second, hope fluttered, but it was just an auto-reply. Out of office through July 15th. Currently living la dolce vita in Italy. Ciao. Mel. I lay there in the dark, staring at my textured ceiling. The same ceiling I'd looked at every night for the past 6 years, ever since I'd bought this practical, sensible apartment. How many other things had Melanie handled while I was busy being practical and sensible? The automated message glowed on my phone screen like a taunt. Ciao indeed, little sister. Ciao indeed. I'd love to say I Wasn't petty enough to spend my lunch break auditing airline accounts, but that would be a lie. Something about Mom and Dad's rehearsed responses kept needling at me. 20 years of accounting teaches you one thing. When people stick to a script, there's usually a reason. The airline website loaded slowly. You'd think with all the fees they charge, they could afford better servers. I logged in, navigated to the activity page, and there they were, 6 business-class tickets to Rome. My coffee went cold as I scrolled through the redemption details. Son of a... I muttered, hitting print on the statement. The machine hummed to life across the room, spitting out page after page of betrayal in crisp black and white. I grabbed my highlighter, yellow for dates, green for point values. Old habits die hard, and color coding had gotten me through more audits than I could count. Each swipe of the marker felt like documenting a wound. Remember those points I'd transferred to her account? The ones she'd said were for Christmas shopping? Well, surprise, they'd funded half the family's Italian getaway. Must have been some Christmas she was planning. My stomach twisted itself into a pretzel. It wasn't just about being left out anymore. This was calculated, deliberate, the kind of thing that takes planning. I drafted and redrafted and emailed to my parents, trying to strike that perfect tone between concerned daughter and competent professional. You know the kind, where every word is carefully chosen to avoid sounding accusatory while still making your point. Dear Mom and Dad, I wrote, once you're back from Italy, I'd appreciate discussing the oversight of the vacation fund. Some concerning patterns have emerged. Delete, delete, delete. Too formal. Hi, Mom and Dad. We should talk about the vacation fund when you get back. Better, but still not right. After an hour of revisions, I finally had something that wouldn't start World War III. I saved it to drafts. Let them enjoy their trip. We could deal with this mess when they got home. I was just about to head back to work when my doorbell rang. A courier stood there with a registered letter requiring my signature. The return address was my parents' lawyer's office. Ever notice how paper can feel heavy, even when it's just a few sheets? This envelope felt like it weighed a ton. I sat at my kitchen counter, the one where I'd spent countless evenings managing that vacation fund, and opened the letter. The legal language was dense, but the message was crystal clear. Effective immediately, management of the Carter Family Vacation Fund was being transferred to Melanie Carter. Both my parents' signatures were there at the bottom, neat and official, with a notary stamp beside them. The date showed last Thursday, the day before I'd seen those Italy photos. My knees went weak. Thank God for bar stools, right? The room did this weird tilting thing, like someone had knocked Earth a few degrees off its axis. 20 years. 20 years I'd managed that fund. Tracked every deposit, documented every withdrawal, filed every receipt. Never a penny. Unaccounted for. And now, without so much as a conversation, it was just gone. I pushed back from the counter and went to my home office. Second drawer down, that's where I kept all the fund documentation. The original trust papers were there, along with years of governance notes in my precise handwriting. The folder was thick with history. I flipped through, looking for the section on management changes. There had to be some procedure, some requirement for consultation, or... That's when I saw it. A small notation in the margin of page 6. A cross-reference I didn't remember making. My finger stopped on the date field next to it, and everything inside me went still. My fingers traced the unfamiliar notation, following its arrow to estate governance. That section of the binder had always been off-limits, the domain of Morton and Associates, my parents' lawyers since before I could drive. But something about that cross-reference gnawed at me. It didn't match my writing style, the way I typically annotated things. You know how accountants are with our systems, right? Every notation has its purpose, every reference its reason. This one felt inserted. I flipped to the tabbed section, the plastic divider crackling like static in the quiet of my apartment. The estate documentation was thorough. Mom and Dad had always been careful about keeping things clear for us kids. But as I scanned the changelog entries from last year, My chest tightened. The dates weren't lining up with any family discussions I could remember. October 15th, November 3rd, December 21st, I muttered, reaching for my sticky flags. Yellow for dates that seemed off, green for language that needed verification. The colors started dotting the pages like confetti, but there was nothing celebratory about what I was finding. Remember how I mentioned being detail-obsessed? Well, this was where that tendency paid off. Each discrepancy I marked could potentially shift who controlled what, when, and how. The implications made my hands shake as I worked. I reached for my phone, took a deep breath to steady myself. The kitchen clock read 9:15 p.m., late in Italy, but this felt important enough to try. My parents' phones went straight to voicemail, probably set to Do Not Disturb, while they explored Tuscany. "Hi, Mom and Dad." I kept my voice even, professional. "When you're back, I'd like to schedule a meeting to review some documentation questions. Nothing urgent, just need clarity on a few points. Love you both." The message felt inadequate, but it would have to do. I grabbed a legal pad and started my checklist. My handwriting was unusually messy. Funny how emotion affects even the smallest things. But the plan was solid. Documentation was my world, after all. Give me a paper trail, and I could follow it anywhere. The familiar weight of the binder settled next to my laptop. I'd start first thing Monday, make some discreet calls to Morton and Associates. Maybe they could shed light on these timing discrepancies. A scraping sound at my door made me jump. I'd been so focused, I hadn't heard anyone in the hallway. Walking over, I found a cream-colored envelope that had been slipped underneath. The return address was Melanie's, postmarked before she left for Italy. Inside was a glossy thank you card, the kind you'd find in those boutique stationery shops she loved. But it wasn't addressed to me. "Dear Mom and Dad," it read in her flowing script. "Thank you for trusting me with our family's plans. Your confidence means everything." I read it twice, then a third time. The word confidence seemed to float off the page, taking on new weight in light of what I'd just discovered in the estate documents. Setting the card beside my checklist, I felt something shift inside me. That electric hum of dread I'd been feeling, it was changing frequency, becoming something more focused, more determined. I looked at my watch, 10:30 p.m. Too late to do more tonight, but tomorrow would be a different story. I needed fresh eyes for what was coming. The binder stayed on my desk, a quiet sentinel in the darkness as I switched off the lamp. Those tabbed pages held answers, I was sure of it. And come morning, I'd start finding them. Monday morning hit different when you knew you were hunting for answers. I'd barely slept, my mind churning over those estate document discrepancies. The office felt like sanctuary. Just me, my computer, and public records access. That came with the job. You ever notice how the familiar buzz of fluorescent lights can sound like a countdown? That's how it felt as I logged into the county probate database. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard for just a second before typing in my parents' names. The results populated faster than I expected. Maybe part of me had hoped for a system delay, anything to postpone what I was about to learn. But there it was. Timestamp 8:47 a.m. Case number 2023 PR 1458, Carter Family Trust. I clicked through to the full filing, and my coffee went cold beside me as I read. The words seemed to float off the screen, each one landing like a punch. Hereby name Melanie Carter as sole trustee. Demonstrated financial acumen. Supersedes all previous arrangements. The revision date was 11 months ago. 11 months of family dinners, holiday gatherings, casual phone calls, all while this change sat there, ticking away like a bomb under the table. My own reflection stared back from the darkened screen, eyes wide, color drained. I hit print before I could second-guess myself. The office printer hummed to life, spitting out pages that felt heavier than paper should. "Hey, Laura, you okay?" My colleague David poked his head around my cubicle wall. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I managed a weak smile. "Just family stuff. Nothing I can't handle. But could I handle it?" The docket in my hands told a different story. I started piecing together moments from the past year, and suddenly Melanie's little comments took on new meaning. Laura's so careful with money. Almost too careful, right, Mom? Thank goodness someone in the family knows how to have fun with finances. Oh, sis, you wouldn't understand. It's about vision, not just numbers. Each memory clicked into place like toxic puzzle pieces. She hadn't just planned a trip without me. She'd orchestrated a complete takeover of our parents' trust. The travel exclusion was just the victory lap. You know what hurts worse than being left out of a family vacation? Realizing your own parents think you can't be trusted with their legacy. That thought sent heat crawling up my neck, prickling behind my eyes. I pulled up a blank document and started typing, letting the accountant in me take over. Facts, dates, document numbers, the kind of summary a lawyer would want to see. Because I'd need a lawyer now, wouldn't I? The thought made my stomach turn. The wall clock ticked past 10:30 a.m. How many billable hours had I wasted today, staring at proof of my sister's betrayal? I glanced at the summary memo taking shape on my screen. It looked so clinical, so bare, just like the numbers I'd built my career on. Numbers don't lie, I whispered to myself, an old mantra from my first accounting professor. People lie. Numbers just are. My phone lit up with a notification. Another Instagram post from Melanie. Because of course she was still posting. This time it was a selfie, her perfectly manicured hand blowing a kiss toward the camera lens. The Colosseum stood magnificent behind her, but all I could see was that smirk I'd grown up with, now weaponized through social media. I flipped the phone face down harder than necessary. The sound made David glance over again, concern etched on his features. He'd been practicing law longer than I'd been counting numbers, and right now I needed that experience more than I needed my pride. The printer hummed again as I made a fresh copy of the probate filings. My hands were steady now, despite everything. Maybe because this part I understood. When the numbers revealed fraud, you called in backup, even if it meant admitting you'd been played by your own blood. I found David in his office, poring over some corporate filing. He looked up as I knocked on his doorframe, those thoughtful eyes of his taking in my expression before I said a word. "Got a minute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "For you? Always. What's troubling you?" I'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times on the walk over, but now that I was here, the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I pulled out the probate documents and laid them on his desk. Let the papers do the talking. They were better at it than I was anyway. David picked up the first page, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. I watched his face as he scanned the text, noting how his expression shifted from professional interest to focused concern. He grabbed a red pen and started circling dates, making quick notes in the margins. "This is..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Concerning. When did you discover this?" "This morning," I said, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "There's more, though. The Italy trip, the frequent flyer miles, the vacation fund. It's all connected. You know that feeling when you finally tell someone what's been eating at you and they actually get it? That's what happened as I laid it all out for David. He didn't interrupt, just kept making notes and nodding, his face growing more serious by the minute. "Laura," he said finally, setting down his pen, "we need to talk about timing. These types of trust revisions typically have a 6-month window before they become extremely difficult to challenge. After that, the structures harden legally." My heart skipped. "How long do we have?" He double-checked his circled dates. Based on the effective date, 12 days. I grabbed my legal pad and wrote in bold letters, "Deadline, 6 months. Days left, 12. Seeing it there in black and white made my pulse quicken. 2 weeks to undo 11 months of my sister's scheming. "What do we need?" I asked, pen poised. David leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Everything. Emails, bank transfers, account, access logs, anything that shows a pattern. We need to build a forensic timeline. Can you get that together?" I almost smiled. If there was one thing I knew how to do, it was document a paper trail. How soon do you need it? Let's meet Wednesday morning for a preliminary review. That gives us time to map out next steps before the deadline. For the next 12 hours, I disappeared into the kind of deep focus that only comes with a clear mission and a ticking clock. Every email got printed, every bank statement annotated, every access log time-stamped. I created a master exhibit list with perfect chain of custody notes, each document labeled, dated, and cross-referenced. You'd think diving into proof of my sister's betrayal would hurt more, but there was something almost comforting about reducing it all to exhibits and timestamps. Numbers don't play favorites. They don't gaslight you at family dinners or exclude you from vacations. They just tell their story, clean and clear. I worked straight through until 2 a.m., double and triple checking my backup files. The forensic packet sat ready on my desk, thick with evidence and organized within an inch of its life. For the first time since seeing that Facebook post, I felt my breathing even out. Having David in my corner, having a plan, it made the mountain ahead feel climbable. I set my phone down carefully, very carefully, next to the stack of evidence I'd spent all night building. 12 days. The clock was ticking. The next evening, I sat in my parents' living room, my evidence binder balanced on my knees. Rain tapped against the windows like nature's timekeeper, each drop another second slipping away. You know that moment before you say something that'll change everything? That's where I was, watching Mom arrange cookies we both knew no one would eat. I appreciate you both making time, I started, my accountant's voice steady despite the drumming in my chest. There are some financial patterns I think you should see. Dad settled into his armchair, the same one he'd read stories to us in when we were kids. The leather creaked as he leaned forward, reading glasses perched on his nose. What's this about, Laura? I opened the binder to the first tab, labeled with precise dates and transaction codes. These are account access logs from the family trust, I explained, passing over highlighted printouts. And here are the corresponding transfer records. Mom peered at the pages. I don't understand all these numbers. Look at the dates, I said gently, pointing to a column of timestamps. See how they align with large withdrawals? Each one corresponds to a cheerful chime cut through the room as Dad's laptop sprang to life. Melanie's face filled the screen, the Italian sunset painting her hotel balcony in golden light. Perfect timing, as always. I thought we should all be here for this discussion, she said, adjusting her designer sunglasses. The same ones bought with my travel points, I noticed. I took a breath and continued, determined to stay professional. These records show a pattern of, oh my God, are you seriously doing this? Melanie's laugh crackled through the speakers. Mom, Dad, she's just jealous. She can't stand that you trust me to handle things now. That's not what this is about, I said, flipping to another tagged page. These transactions, see what I mean? Melanie interrupted again. This is exactly why I had to step in. She's obsessed with controlling everything, analyzing everything to death. It's not healthy. I watched my parents' faces change as Melanie spoke. The initial curiosity in their eyes hardened into something worse, pity. They weren't seeing the evidence anymore. They were seeing their daughter, the accountant, desperately clutching at papers and numbers. Laura, Dad said softly, and my heart sank. I knew that tone. It was the same one he used when I was 12 and tried to prove Melanie had stolen my birthday money. Maybe you should take some time, get some perspective. The disappointment in his eyes hit harder than anger would have. 25 years of managing their finances, organizing their records, protecting their interests, all of it vaporized in the face of Melanie's practiced concern. I'm worried about you, sis, Melanie added, her voice dripping with false sympathy. This isn't like you, making these wild accusations. My hands were steady as I closed the binder. They'd always been steady, even when the rest of me was falling apart. Thank you for listening, I said, rising from the couch. I'll let myself out. The drive home was a blur of rain and rhythm, windshield wipers marking time like a metronome. Left, right, counting down the days we had left to act. Back in my apartment, I sat on the floor surrounded by stacks of papers, years of records, months of research, all carefully labeled and categorized. Maybe Melanie was right. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe it would hurt less to just let go, be forgotten, fade into the background like I always had. I reached for the lamp, ready to call it a night, ready to call it done, maybe. Then I saw it. There, in the corner of Exhibit J, something odd in the scanner artifact. I froze, hand still on the lamp switch. Pulled the page closer. No, not closer. I needed the digital version. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the high-resolution scans. Heart pounding, I zoomed in on the signature blocks, the image growing larger and larger until... There it was, under harsh digital magnification. Mother's signature, or what was supposed to be her signature, splayed across my screen in stuttering pixels. You know that moment when something feels off, but you can't put your finger on why. This was the opposite. Every detail screamed, wrong. I traced the letter formations with my pencil tip, not touching the screen. Mother's M always had a distinctive flow. Years of watching her sign birthday cards and permission slips had burned it into my memory. This version was hesitant, like someone drawing the shape rather than writing it. My hands were shaking as I pulled up her previous signatures from my archives. Thank God for my filing obsession, right? I had 5 years of notarized documents, each with her authentic signature, tucked away in dated folders. The overlay comparison made my stomach drop. The spacing was wrong. The pressure points were wrong. Even the angle was off by several degrees. I'd spent 20 years reviewing financial documents. Spotting irregularities was literally my job. And this was amateur hour. My sister had forged our mother's signature. The realization hit like ice water. Not just fraud, forgery, criminal forgery, the kind that could undo everything Melanie had orchestrated. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I spent hours compiling signature samples, arranging them chronologically, noting dates and circumstances for each. By dawn, I had a forensic timeline that would make a detective proud. Look at the baseline drift, I told David over screen share at 7:30 a.m. My coffee was still too hot to drink, but I couldn't wait. And see how the terminal strokes lack confidence? David leaned closer to his webcam, salt and pepper hair catching the morning light. Send me the high-res files, he said. I know someone, retired FBI document examiner. She can have a preliminary opinion by noon. I hit send before he finished speaking. The clock on my wall seemed louder than usual, each tick reminding me we had barely 72 hours left before the 6-month deadline expired. The examiner's report landed in my inbox at 11:43 a.m. I read it 3 times, each pass confirming what I already knew. The signature was highly likely fraudulent, with 9 points of disparity highlighted. We file today, David said when I called. The forgery count goes front and center, followed by breach of fiduciary duty. Keep it clean, keep it focused. He paused. You know what this means, Laura? I did. 1. False signature could topple Melanie's whole house of cards. We spent the afternoon crafting the pleading. David's experience showed in every paragraph, each word chosen for maximum impact, every exhibit numbered and cross-referenced. My years of documentation hadn't been paranoia after all. They were ammunition. At 4:15 p.m., I stood in my office staring at the final printout. 23 pages that could restore everything. My place in the Yi'ag, family, my parents' trust, the truth. I slid them into a rigid envelope, the kind that can't be bent or damaged, the kind that protects what matters. The courthouse steps were empty when I arrived at 4:45 p.m. Winter air bit through my coat as I watched the clerk's window, where a bored-looking woman was starting her end-of-day routine. 15 minutes until closing, 15 minutes to file the document that would change everything. I held the envelope in both hands, feeling its weight. Not just paper, consequences, evidence, justice. The clerk's window light clicked off right as I reached for the handle. Remember thinking your sibling rivalry would fade with age? Yeah, me too. But sometimes growing up just means the stakes get higher, and sometimes justice comes down to the wire. Literally. I was back at the courthouse steps before sunrise, watching my breath cloud in the January air. You ever notice how time moves differently when you're waiting? Those minutes until the doors opened felt longer than the whole night before. The security guard recognized me from yesterday. "Early bird," he said, checking my ID. I managed a tight smile, clutching my envelope like it might sprout wings. First in line at the clerk's window, I could still smell coffee on my clothes from the all-nighter. The clerk, different from yesterday's, moved with the unhurried precision of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Each stamp landed with a solid thunk that echoed in the empty lobby. "Filed and recorded," she said, handing back my receipt. My hands were steady as I took it, but my heart was doing sprints. You know that moment in movies where the hero defuses a bomb with seconds to spare? This felt like that, minus the dramatic music. I texted David from the courthouse steps. "Filed." His response came fast. "Hearing Friday, 9 a.m., Judge Martinez, get ready." Friday, 3 days to prepare. I'd worked under tighter deadlines, but never with stakes this high. Back at my apartment, I turned the dining room into Command Central. Ever seen one of those crime shows where they have a wall covered in photos and sticky notes? That was me, minus the red string. Timeline charts stretched across my table, color-coded and annotated, bank records, travel receipts, and signatures. So many signatures. Mother's real ones spanning 20 years, lined up against Melanie's forgery like a visual lie detector. I caught maybe 4 hours of sleep that night, waking up every couple hours to double-check my deadline math. We'd filed with exactly 2 days to spare before the 6-month window slammed shut. The numbers were solid. They had to be. David met me outside courtroom 4B on Friday morning, both of us carrying matching binders packed with exhibits. "Remember," he said, adjusting his tie, "let the evidence speak for itself." I nodded, running through our prep in my head. I'd practiced explaining the signature discrepancies until I could do it in my sleep, which I practically had. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, all dark wood and hushed voices. Funny how some places just command reverence, isn't it? I settled into the chair beside David, laying my palms flat on the cool table surface. The wood grain helped ground me. Melanie swept in 2 minutes before 9, wearing what looked like a month's worth of my salary. Her lawyer, tall, silver-haired, expensive suit, carried a single slim folder. They took their seats across the aisle, and I felt Melanie's eyes slide over me like I was furniture. Judge Martinez entered exactly at 9. No-nonsense reading. Glasses perched low on her nose as she opened our filing. The room went library quiet. I watched her face as she flipped pages, but she might as well have been playing poker. Then she hit the signature exhibits. Her eyebrow lifted just a fraction, the first real reaction I'd seen. "Counsel," she said, looking up, "I see we have some evidentiary issues to address first." She tapped the signature page. "Particularly regarding foundation and admissibility of these exhibits." I kept my breathing steady, the way David had coached me. In through the nose, out through the ribs. The judge's gaze swept across both tables, settling nowhere. "Your Honor," Melanie's lawyer started, half rising. "Save it," Judge Martinez cut in. "I want to hear foundation first." She set her glasses down deliberately. "Counsel, approach." David squeezed my arm once as he stood. I watched him and Melanie's lawyer move toward the bench, their shoes whispering against the carpet. 20 years of documentation, 6 months of manipulation, and my sister's forgery, all of it hanging on what would happen in the next few minutes. I held the judge's eyes when she glanced my way, trying to read something, anything, in her expression. But her face stayed neutral as Switzerland while the lawyers reached her bench. From where I sat, I could read every micro-expression that crossed Melanie's face as David walked the judge through our evidence. He started with Mother's known signatures, 20 years of tax returns, property deeds, even my birthday cards. Each one displayed the same distinctive loop in her capital M's, the way her Y's always dipped below the line. "Your Honor," David said, "note the consistent pressure patterns and natural variation across these authenticated samples." He moved to the next board. "Now compare those characteristics to the estate document signatures." Melanie's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is attempting to present expert testimony without proper foundation." I held my breath, but David was ready. He pulled out our preliminary expert report, complete with CV and methodology sections. "We have a qualified forensic document examiner's opinion, Your Honor. Mr. Chen has testified in over 50 cases regarding signature authentication." Judge Martinez studied the report through her reading glasses. "Objection overruled. Proceed." The courtroom fell so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. David clicked to the next slide, showing high-resolution overlays of Mother's genuine signatures compared to the estate documents. Even from the gallery, the differences jumped out. Irregular spacing, unnatural uniformity in the U pressure points. "If you'll observe here," David highlighted specific areas, "these signatures show evidence of digital manipulation. Note the identical pixel patterns in these loops, suggesting copying and pasting rather than natural handwriting variation." Melanie's perfectly made-up face tightened just a fraction. She whispered something to her lawyer, who shook his head slightly. David moved to our timeline board next. "These unauthorized transfers," he traced the red lines connecting dates, "align precisely with the estate document changes and subsequent travel miles redemptions. The pattern demonstrates both means and opportunity." I watched Judge Martinez lean forward, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Counselor, if I'm following correctly, the validity of the entire trustee arrangement hinges on these signature authentications?" "Precisely, Your Honor," David confirmed. "If the signatures are indeed forged, the instrument naming Ms. Melanie Carter as trustee is void ab initio. Control would revert to the previous valid arrangement." For the first time since we'd entered the courtroom, I felt like I could take a full breath. The judge was seeing it, really seeing it. But I forced myself to stay perfectly still. I'd learned the hard way not to count victories before they were final. The judge called a 15-minute recess. As we filed out, I noticed a man in pressed khakis leaning close to one of the court officers, notebook in hand. A reporter, I realized, recognizing the press badge clipped to his belt. David and I used the recess to review our closing points in the hallway. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a news alert. My stomach dropped as I read the headline, "Local Family Estate Battle, Forgery Allegations Surface in Carter Dispute." "David," I showed him my phone. More notifications were already popping up as other outlets picked up the story. He skimmed the article quickly. "It's factual, not sensational. This was bound to happen. Public records." He squeezed my shoulder. "Stay focused on what matters." When we returned to the courtroom, Melanie was staring at her own phone, her knuckles white around the case. The story was spreading, and we all knew it. Whatever happened next would play out not just in court documents, but in headlines. Judge Martinez returned exactly on time, settling into her chair with deliberate movements. "I've reviewed the evidence presented regarding document authentication and chain of custody. Given the complexity of the technical evidence and the serious nature of these allegations, I will issue a detailed ruling within 48 hours. She fixed both tables with a stern look. "I remind all parties that these proceedings remain under judicial supervision until final disposition. We're adjourned." The sharp crack of her gavel made me jump slightly. 48 hours. After months of discovery and preparation, we had to wait 2 more days to know if justice would finally arrive. Sleep wasn't happening. I'd given up around 4 a.m. and driven the familiar route to my cabin, the one place that still felt wholly mine. You know those moments when Dawn's just starting to think about showing up? That's when I pulled into the gravel drive, killed the engine, and just sat there listening to it tick cool. The cabin wasn't much, just a modest A-frame my grandparents left me, perched on a quiet stretch of lakeshore. But it was mine. Or at least, it had been mine until Melanie's machinations put everything into question. I walked the perimeter as first light crept over the water, trailing my fingers along the rough-hewn doorframes like I was saying a prayer. Each touch felt like a promise. This stays mine. This matters. This is worth fighting for. Inside, I fired up my laptop one more time to check the title records. The screen's glow felt harsh against the gentle dawn seeping through the windows. With Melanie's trustee status suspended pending the court's ruling, the cabin's status hung in a kind of legal limbo. Not immediately, threatened, but not fully secured either, like holding your breath underwater, knowing you'll need to surface soon. "Come on, show me something good," I muttered, scrolling through the digital files. Everything looked stable, but stable wasn't the same as safe. Not yet. I pulled up a fresh document and started typing an addendum for David, mapping out exactly how the governance chain would reset if, when, the judge voided Melanie's forged documents. The familiar rhythm of organizing facts helped steady my hands. My phone buzzed. Mom and Dad's number lit up the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Laura?" Mom's voice sounded thin, uncertain. "We've been thinking." "We never meant for any harm," Dad cut in. His words wavered like he was testing ice. "We're just confused about everything." I kept my voice level, professional. "The judge will rule within 24 hours now. We should wait to discuss anything until after that." "But sweetheart—" "I need to go," I said, gentler than I felt. "I'll call you once we have the decision." After hanging up, I opened a new document and typed 3 simple words. Cabin safe PO box. 3 nouns that meant security. 3 things to protect. I printed the page and folded it into my court folder, a reminder of what we were fighting for. The morning crawled by. I showered, changed into my charcoal suit, and headed to the courthouse early. Even 2 hours before the scheduled ruling, the parking lot was fuller than usual. Inside, the gallery was packed. Seemed like half the town had shown up to watch. I caught fragments of whispered conversations. Family estate, forgery allegations, Carter sisters. Our story had become public entertainment. Funny how betrayal plays better than loyalty when it comes to headlines. David arrived, impeccable as always in his navy suit. He gave my shoulder a quick squeeze as he settled beside me at counsel table. "Ready?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. The bailiff called us to order. Judge Martinez entered, her face unreadable. Her clerk followed, carrying a stack of sealed envelopes. "Please be seated," the judge said. "My clerk will distribute copies of the ruling to counsel." The envelope felt impossibly heavy in my hands. My heart hammered so hard I wondered if everyone could hear it. The paper crackled as I broke the seal, hands steady despite everything. I started scanning for the dispositive paragraph, the one that would tell us whether we'd won or lost everything. But my eyes caught on a footnote first, and the world seemed to pause around those small printed words. You know that moment just before you learn whether something will save or destroy you? That's where I sat, holding my breath, that footnote burning into my vision while the rest of the ruling waited to be read. I forced my eyes from the footnote and found the dispositive paragraph. My heart stuttered, then raced as I read. The court finds clear and convincing evidence that the instrument dated March 15th was materially altered through forgery of Margaret Carter's signature. Said instrument is hereby declared void. Melanie Carter's appointment as trustee is terminated effective immediately. All fiduciary breaches identified in Exhibits A through K are referred to the State Bar Association for ethics review. The words blurred. I had to blink hard to clear my vision. My next inhale shuddered through my chest like a tremor. David leaned close, whispering, "We did it. The neutral fiduciary takes over today. You're formally cleared of all allegations." I nodded, still processing. The judge was speaking, something about filing deadlines for appeals, but it felt distant. All I could focus on was the weight lifting from my shoulders, months of doubt and betrayal dissolving in black and white clarity. When we stepped into the courthouse hallway, camera lights flared. The local reporter who'd been following the case held her phone up, reading directly from the order. In a stunning ruling today, the Superior Court has invalidated attempts by Melanie Carter to seize control of her family's estate through forged documents. I watched Melanie's face as the words hit. Her carefully maintained mask cracked, then shattered. All those years of cultivating the perfect image, successful businesswoman, devoted daughter, social media darling, swept away in seconds. The afternoon headlines would brand her a fraud in plain language, stripping away every layer of pretense she'd built. My parents stood near the water fountain, looking shell-shocked. Mom's hand covered her mouth. Dad's shoulders had collapsed inward. The truth they'd refused to see was now fixed in permanent ink, impossible to ignore or explain away. I walked past them without speaking. What was there to say? They'd chosen their side, believed what they wanted to believe. Now they'd have to live with that choice. The drive to my cabin felt surreal. Trees blurred past my windows as afternoon faded to evening. All those months of uncertainty, wondering if I'd lose this last piece of my grandparents' legacy. And now it was secure. Really secure. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of pine and old wood wrapped around me like a welcome. I dropped my briefcase, kicked off my shoes, and padded through the quiet rooms. Everything exactly where it should be. Everything mine. Sleep came in fits and starts that night. I kept waking to check my phone, rereading the court documents saved in my email, reassuring myself it was real. Around 5 a.m., I gave up and made coffee. The sun was just starting to rise as I walked out onto the dock. Morning mist hovered over the lake, breaking apart in golden threads as light crept across the water. My keys felt warm in my palm. Solid, real. A concrete reminder that some things can't be taken if you fight hard enough to keep them. I watched ripples catch the strengthening sunlight, scattering it like fresh pages being turned, like new ledgers opening, steady and clean. The air smelled of pine needles and possibility. Standing there, I thought about that Facebook post that started everything. Italy with just the immediate family. Such a small thing, really. Petty exclusion meant to wound. Who could have guessed it would end with Melanie losing everything she'd schemed to control? I took a deep breath of morning air and smiled. The words came naturally, meant as much for anyone who might need them as for myself. Exclusion only sharpened my strength. The lake rippled in agreement as another day began.